meeting of our MTC, a meeting of our Cable Commission, and a joint meeting with Lane Act and the Oregon Transportation Commission. So with your indulgence, we're going to move forward. Paul, do you want to, have you started the recording of the virtual meeting?
Yes, the meeting has been recorded already, or is recording already, and so we are set to go.
Okie doke. Brenda, would you be so kind as to identify who's in attendance?
Brenda stepped away for a moment, so I will do that. For the record, going down the list that I have of participants, so I see Commissioner Joe Burney, Ann Davis from Elkhog, Ann Heath from City of Coburg, Caitlin Vargas from Lane Transit District, Dan Hurley, Lane County, Dennis Mitchell from DKS, Ellen Courier from Elkhog, Heather Buck, Lane County, Keith Weiss is joining us, although he left as I said that. Lucy Venice, Mayor of Eugene, Lynn Taylor, our minutes recorder, Metro TV is here for broadcasting, Rachel Dorfman from Elkhog, Randy Groves, City of Eugene, Rob Innerfeld from the City of Eugene, who is sitting in today for Matt Rodriguez, Sid Schoaf from Elkhog, and Woody Woodbury. I believe that is everybody in attendance at this time.
No. Do you have something against Councilor Moe from Springfield?
Moe from Springfield?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have anything against Councilor Moe, except his name shows his iPad, so that was my mistake for not. I should have recognized that iPad is in attendance.
Welcome everyone. I'm now convening the June meeting of the MPC, and at this point, we begin our meeting with comments from the audience. Anyone wishing to comment is asked to sign up, and a limit of 3 minutes per person. Paul, do we have any people who would like to provide testimony to the MPC?
Commissioner, no one notified me in advance that to speak today, and I don't see any members of the public present at this time.
Okay, well, then we are now on item 4, believe it or not, of our agenda, which is Metropolitan Planning Organization issues. 4A, draft ITS, which I've recently learned because I'm intelligent, stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems. And we are going to start with a staff presentation. And I believe we have Kelly Clark and Dennis Mitchell to lead us through that.
Commissioner Kelly was not able to make today's meeting, so I actually am going to do a brief introduction of the item. We have Dennis Mitchell from DKS who will do the actual presentation of the draft plan. And we also have Ellen Courier who can help with follow-up questions and discussion. So if you recall, over the past more than 1 or 2 years, we at Lane Council of Governments have been updating the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO's, long-range plans, in particular the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, the Congestion Management Plan, and the Intelligent Transportation System Plan, the ITS plans. The ITS plan is before you today in draft form. It's in your packet or posted online if you get an electronic packet. And we have today, as I said, is Dennis Mitchell from DKS, who was the main consultant who helped us prepare this draft, is here to give a presentation on it. And then after the presentation, we will ask that there be a public hearing on the draft plan, and we will ask for action of adoption at the next MPC meeting. So Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you, but give me just a second here while I share my screen and get the slides up.
Great, thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Okay, got the presentation up. Okay, you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. The first thing I wanted to just identify, just going to give an overview of the plan itself and what's contained in it. But the first thing is, what is the goals of this ITS plan? And they're pretty straightforward, and I'll just read them here. number one is improve the safety and security of the transportation system. We want to improve the efficiency of the transportation system, provide improved traveler information, develop and deploy a cost-efficient ITS infrastructure, integrate regional ITS projects with local and regional partners, and then monitor transportation performance measures, sort of to see how well that's doing and make adjustments if necessary. But really is what we decided to do, is it actually performing as we expected? That's really what that last one is. Next slide. So there are 5 chapters in this plan, and I'll just give you an overview of these. The chapter 1 is current conditions, and what we did here was just to document the existing operating conditions. In other words, what ITS systems, devices are already out there in your area. How are things operationally working? How is data sharing, communications between agencies? How is all that happening today? Is a sort of a background and a starting point for this plan. The second chapter is really looking at developing the goals, which I just outlined for you, and from that, objectives, and then defining what the user needs are. And when I say user needs, I mean, what are the system needs identified by all the agencies, coming up with specific, let's say, issues or problem areas or projects, so they came up with a very long list of the different types of needs that this plan could address. And all those are documented in the second chapter. The third chapter, ITIS architecture, it's maybe hard to understand because architecture doesn't really define what that is, but really what this is a planning tool for implementing ITS systematically. In other words, it really documents data flows and communications between agencies so that you can, let's say, have each computer at each jurisdiction talk to other computers from the other jurisdictions. That's the best way to explain that is you got to be able to talk the same language. And so devices out in the field in one jurisdiction should talk to Central the same way it does in another jurisdiction. So it's really a high level thing. And it's also a federal requirement for federal funding. So it's necessary, a necessary evil, I call it, because it's a lot of really detailed, hard to understand drawings and data flows. But it's all in that chapter in very detailed form. Chapter 4 is the communications plan. In other words, some of the projects in the ITS is actual physical hardware or systems on the roadside or in transit vehicles. It's all those things that we need to communicate with. Like, you need to know where the buses are at, or you need to know how a signal is operating, those type of things. You need to identify how the communications piece of that is going to support those projects. And defining that, for the whole area is what's the future communication needs and plan, how do we achieve that? And then chapter 5 is the deployment plan. And it's really, the main thing is it's the list of the projects that were selected and supported by staff from all the jurisdictions involved. Next slide. And there we go. So developing the list of projects, we worked with all the jurisdictions in this urban area. They're all listed here, and you're all members of these jurisdictions. But we had staff level input from all the jurisdictions and came up with a list of projects to try to address a lot of the needs that were identified early on in the project. And there were a number of projects that were related or precursors to another project. And so we ended up combining some of those projects so that each project in this list is a standalone project, can be implemented without having to build something else. And so So I'll give you a sample of some of the projects, but there are projects that are physical in nature. In other words, you're going to go out and build something out on the road. There are some projects which are either coordination or integration of systems that are not so much physical out in the world. It might be back in an office, and so those are a little bit harder to show. But there's a whole mix of these type of projects. And then what do we do with this list? Well, the list boiled down to 31 projects, and those projects will be added into the mix in the RTP update of looking at, the list of projects to be considered for putting into the RTP. And so this really just identified, what's the future needs in terms of ITS, and can be used in the RTP, but it can also be looking at opportunity funding. And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but the whole idea is develop a plan so you have some ideas of where you want to go with ITS, so that as opportunities arise, you can, go after grant funding, things like that. But it also, again, it was done at this time with the RTP update so that these projects could be included in the sort of recommendations of possible projects. Next slide. So just some of the things that we considered in coming up with this list of projects. We looked at the map up on the top right. It's hard to read at this scale, but just really wanted to show you what we looked at. Was the top one on the right is congestion today. And so the darker the color, the more congested it is. But this is existing conditions. So we looked at this to say, okay, what projects can ITS propose that would address or try to address some of these congestion areas? And we did the same for vehicle crashes, which is on the bottom left. And that's all the vehicle crashes in the last few years. And then on the right is all the bike and pedestrian crashes. And so we took all this into account to try to identify the needs and what we can do with ITS to try to address some of those. Obviously, we can't do everything with ITS, but there's a lot of things that we can do. Next slide. So this is just one page out of the project list. It happens to be the first page. And I just wanted to show you what it sort of looks like. The first few happen to be on the freeway system, and they're more of a freeway management type strategy on all these projects. And when I say freeway management, that includes things like queue warning systems, traveler information, ramp metering, variable speed. All those things are potential pieces of each of these corridors. And so this list would give you a project title, a short description of the project, who the lead agency would be, the cost estimate that we've developed, what strategy it is, and which ITS plan goals are addressed by this particular project. And so Chapter 5 includes the entire list of the 31 projects. Next slide. And then we tried to map a lot of these projects, but as I mentioned earlier, some of these projects are physically out on the road, and some are more of a system project, and so they're not really shown on the map here. But what you'll see is the corridors on the freeway system are identified, and then the arterial corridors are also identified on here, projects. And then there are spot-specific projects such as railroad advanced warning systems, or the blue dots. And so some of the system projects, it could include I'll give you examples, would be a central computer system that controls the signals. And it could be not just like City of Eugene has one, City of Springfield has one, Lane County has one. The project would be to have one system that all the jurisdictions can tie into to share the data and to control, let's say, arterials across jurisdictional boundaries. So it's coordinated. So that wouldn't show up on the map here because it's more of a computer back-end type system project. Next slide. So we also included a fact sheet with more detail on each project. So every project will have this fact sheet, which summarizes, again, the objective of the project, a more detailed description of the project, who the stakeholders are. So not just the lead agency, but who may be affected by this from a jurisdictional standpoint. What communications requirements are there for this project? What are the costs of the project? What impacts to current operations and maintenance for these projects? Because some projects, you build something, you have to maintain it every year after that. So what are the impacts for that? Which needs are addressed by this particular project, and what are the benefits of this particular project? And we developed these, we've used these in other areas because of the potential of getting funding, grant funding. And so having this ready, because a lot of times Federal Highway will come out with these grant opportunities, and then when you're scrambling to come up with a project to be able to submit to them for funding, now you've got a quick sheet to say, okay, this funding, this opportunity comes up. You can look at this and go, okay, this fits the criteria of what they're looking for. So it's very helpful. We've done a lot of these ITS plans recently where that's been a big piece of it, more than anything else that came out of the plans. Is kind of strange, but that's the way it's. So we've provided that here as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick summary of the breakdown of the types of projects. We categorize these just so you get an understanding of where they fit in terms of how dollar-wise total. So the first category I want to explain a little more is, it says traffic management operations. And normally you would see freeway management and arterial management as really a subset of that. But I wanted to break that out so you could get a better feel for where we're suggesting these projects are at. So the traffic management operations could be the central arterial management system, but not a specific corridor. Whereas the arterial management is really talking about specific corridor, doing stuff out on the road, whether it's upgrading the signal controllers, adding surveillance like cameras, upgrading communications to the devices along the route. So those are the type of things in the arterial management side. So we've got freeway management, we've got arterial management, and then we've got multimodal projects. So that would include, transit projects, upgrades to their systems, also, pedestrian crossings, automated, pedestrian crossings were included within this category. And then there's traveler information. So it's really ideas on putting up variable message signs or providing data to websites or through text messages, things, just all the different ways of providing information to travelers. And then there's data management, incident and emergency management, maintenance and construction management. And then what you don't see is a category called safety. And the reason for that is every ITS project, the number one goal of that project is safety. So if I put a safety category in here, every project would fall within it. And some of these projects overlap in other categories. And so I just want to point that out, that the whole reason for doing ITS is safety, number one. And so I that's why you don't see the word safety in any of these categories.
Well, actually we do. It's on the last bullet, and it looks as if it's just like another bullet.
Yes, you're right. I should have put it in a different color or something, because it's not a category that I've put, but I put that on there to make that point. But thank you. with that, that's just a brief overview of the document, and I'm willing to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, sir. Paul, was there any, you mentioned several people, was there any other part of that presentation before we open a public hearing?
No, Commissioner, that's the staff presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. At this time, I will open a public hearing and ask if there are any questions, comments, or discussion by any MPC members. And it would be helpful to have a full screen so I could see if anyone's raising their hand. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but I have a very small screen. If you have a question, just holler.
Josh.
Commissioner, are you taking questions from the members at this point?
Yes, sir.
I believe Josh Scove raised his hand.
Josh, I'm really sorry. I couldn't see. This meeting is difficult. Please go ahead.
No worries. No, you did ask me to shout out. I was just being timid. Thank you. And I want to apologize for being late. I had the other time in my calendar, so sorry to be showing up kind of in the middle of this. But I'm really interested in many of the things that fall under ITS, and I find a lot of them really exciting. And it's great to sort of squeeze more efficiency out of our local transportation system. This is better than just more concrete and steel. And so overall, I'm sort of excited by and supportive of these things. Let me ask a question a little bit predictable, maybe from.
It's already done. She's in.
We're getting feedback. I think it's from you, Paul.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I think Paul was unmuted. So the thing I was going to ask is this. It strikes me that we have, if you're coming from the standpoint of figuring out how to make this a low carbon transportation system, an equitable transportation system, one that has more walking and biking and transit, and all of the economic and environmental and social benefit that comes from that, it seems like the money being spent is really tilted toward roads for cars and freeways. Is that inherent in sort of like how expensive these things are? Should I see maybe disproportionate benefit in the multimodal piece? But multimodal seems really small, and the money going to just expanding car capacity seems very big.
I would say that a couple of things. One is I categorize these by what I think is the main area that the project would do, but some overlap in different categories. So I'll say that first. But let's see, ITS can only do certain things. And so if you look at what, let's say pedestrian on bicycle, it could be doing better detection for bicycles at signalized intersections. It can be automating flashers, for pedestrian crossings to detect instead of push button, or providing power or communications to be able to monitor how those systems work. But those are relatively inexpensive compared to the other types of projects. So that's why, partly why, and also ITS what it can do is improve the efficiency of things. And so, unfortunately, you're right. It's sort of geared toward making the existing system more efficient. And so it's going to get your most bang for your buck related to ITS in terms of improving the transportation system for vehicular movement, all vehicles.
Okay, that's very helpful, Dennis. Thank you. And just, I don't know how many people in this meeting have experienced it, but the bicycle detection on the two-way protected bikeway on 13th in downtown Eugene is really amazing. And if you're a bicyclist who usually thinks of not having that sort of capability because it's fairly rare in our towns, it's actually pretty exciting to see. But I can see how that costs a lot less than some of the other solutions. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sco. Are there any other questions or comments from board members? I don't see any. Anyone? Could I say, Dennis, that in your presentation, 2 or 3 times you mentioned you're doing this to get prepared to try and get more money. And I'm wondering what's really driving this. Is it the money, or is it improving our existing transportation system? Or in fact, when you use the word intelligent, is our current system stupid? Why are we using that particular term? If you
It used to have a different term when ITS first came out. It was Intelligent Highway Vehicle System. That was the first name of it. So it's changed over time because that was a question that was always asked: does that mean everything else is stupid? And you're right. It's just a term, but the goal is to improve the efficiency. In other words, there's certain capacity on roadways and freeways, and you're never going to reach 100% capacity, theoretical capacity, because of all the inefficiencies. And so really ITS is a matter of saying, how can I automate things? How can I improve, make things work better, react to real time to make the system work better? And so that's really all it is. And so the goal is to make the most efficient use of what you've got as a tool, but it's not the one silver bullet that'll fix everything. It's just a piece of overall strategy. But that's the idea, is with ITS is to get the best use out of your system and fully automate it, make it less costly to operate. Those are the goals. But now some reality is, let's say, go back to the 2003 adoption of the previous ITS plan. And there were a number of projects. There was like 60 some projects on that. And some of them were implemented and a lot of them had not been implemented yet. So that's the reality, is yes, there's a lot of ideas that go into developing it and not all of them are going to get funded. But the idea is, create the list of projects you'd like to do, and as much as you can get it into the RTP and funded, but also look for other opportunities. And that's why I made that point
that's sort of basic, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I didn't see, we just had a presentation recently by the Lane Transit District that was talking to us about how their intelligent transportation system is also going to get to a 0 carbon emission goal. Is that built into this in any way?
As part of the ITS plan itself, we have not looked at that issue.
Commissioner?
Yes.
If I can just add a little bit to the responses to your question. First, the most basic reason for the existence of the plan is that the Federal Transportation Bill requires NPOs to produce and maintain an ITS plan. And it has to achieve a couple of things. One of the key ones is it has to keep the region's intelligent transportation system architecture, in other words, the data architecture or the data network, consistent with the federal architecture. The goal of this being a federal requirement with respect to that is so that everything can talk to everything else and you don't have different systems being implemented everywhere. But, the other thing I want to say is, as Dennis mentioned, one of the big goals here is efficient use of the existing system. So to the earlier comment by Mr. Scove about adding auto capacity, in a sense, it's not about adding capacity in the way we sometimes think about that traditionally. In other words, adding more lanes or adding more, physical capacity. It's about more efficiently using what we have for throughput, so we don't need to add more lanes as quick as we might otherwise have to do. And also to your comment just now, Commissioner, one of the other federal goals with this is if you have more efficient throughput and more efficient use of the system and less congestion, you will have less idling and fewer emissions. So there's lots of things tied up in this.
Thank you. Board, my understanding is that this is our opportunity to provide feedback and direction to staff. So are there any other comments at this time? I see none. Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Thompson. We are,
Chair,
yes.
unless I didn't hear, I do need you to conduct the public hearing for this.
You didn't hear. What do I need to do? I opened it up before we had this discussion. Paul, we then asked for discussion. What else would you like before we close?
So you opened the public hearing, and I just want to confirm I had nobody from the public sign up to speak before. So I will just ask on your behalf now, is there anybody wishing to speak at the public hearing? And Commissioner, I believe you can now close the public hearing.
Well, thank you very much for covering for me, sir. Okay, this public hearing is now closed. Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. We're on item number 5, and forgive my hastiness. We just all know what our schedule is today. Metropolitan Cable Commission issues. I am to remind you that this involves only the Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County MPC members. I encourage the rest of you to rejoin us at noon with Lane Act. And item 5A, 2021 PEG grant distributions. Staff presentation will be, I believe, from Ann Davies from LCOG. Is that correct?
Yep.
Please, Ann, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. This should be as quick as most of my items are, which is generally 3 to 7 minutes. It may last a little longer than that if you have questions. So I supplied you with a memo that explains kind of the history of this process. Every year we get $50,000 from Comcast to give grants to the PEG channels to buy equipment. The government channel, Neil Moyer, gets a separate $50,000. So the $50,000 we're talking about right now is money that goes to the other non-government channels. So P&E, public and education. As you're aware, the education channel that we now call the education channel used to be the LCC channel, but it's now going to be called the education channel. So when you look at the chart on my memo, you'll see past distributions of grants to LCC and a current one for the education channel. So that's why that looks different. So generally, as I just mentioned, we get $50,000. You may be wondering why we are distributing $71,000. That's because there have been a few years in the past when we either didn't grant the full 50 or we granted the full 50 and then the money actually was never spent. Either the channel decided not to buy the equipment or it turned out to be less expensive than what they anticipated. So we have a little extra money. Neil Moyer from Metro TV did get together with the other channels to talk about what equipment they might need, and really worked hard this year to streamline everything and make sure that the equipment was purchased that would be able to be used interchangeably among the channels so that they can be borrowing each other's equipment, which is very helpful. It's very important that Neil's involved in this so that he can be advising and making sure all the channels are able to work together. So that was really helpful this year in particular. So I have the memo, and there's also an attachment to the memo that explains in detail all of the equipment that was requested. The staff got together and decided that that was all appropriate, partly because Neil had done the background work ahead of time. So the recommendation is to grant the requested funds. What I do want to mention, there is a stipulation that we're recommending that you make, and that is that if the channels are purchasing equipment, that equipment is generally supposed to be used to facilitate broadcasting on the PEG channels. So if there is content that's created We don't really want that content to be only distributed on a place like YouTube. It can be distributed on YouTube, but it should also be then broadcast also on the PEG channels. So that's kind of a discussion we've been having for the last couple of years. But your recommendation, our recommendation to you is to include that stipulation. So if you make a motion to adopt our recommendation, it would include that stipulation. And that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Well, thank you very much. And when we do get time for a motion, perhaps you could provide a few less words that we could use to make the stipulation in the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments, discussions by MPC members on this item? I see and hear none, Ann.
Okay.
Given that, is there a motion?
Yeah, so if you do want help with that motion, the language that I have in the memo is that staff also recommends that a stipulation be included that any programming developed with the grant-funded equipment be aired on a PEG channel.
Well, you know, we have before us an action requested approval of staff recommendations for the 2021 grant cycle. It seemed, would that not include what you just stated? Okay.
Yes, it would.
So at this point, if there are no comments or questions, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make that motion, but I can't figure out where the language is. So how would I do that?
You probably second it.
Would staff mind telling me what I want to say?
I will tell you, I move to approve the staff recommendations for distribution of the 2021 PEG grants.
Okay, Steve, your turn.
That's the motion to make.
Okay.
I second it.
Councillor Moe has moved approval of staff recommendations for the 2021 grant cycle. And his mayor, Mayor Van Gordon, has seconded it. Is there discussion to the motion? Seeing no discussion, I'm now going to request a vote. This is one where we can raise our hands and yell out, and we'll figure out what the vote is. All those in favor of the motion, please signify however you'd like. Opposed, same sign. And let the record show that the motion to approve staff recommendation for the 2021 Metropolitan Cable Commission grant cycle has been moved by Councillor Moe, seconded by Mayor Van Gordon, and unanimously approved. Thank you very much, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for helping me.
Yeah.
I've never heard Mr. Moe ask me what he's supposed to say, so I don't know how you.
Luckily, I had my script available.
It is now 11:41. Are there any items to discuss before we reconvene with Lane Act and the chair of the Oregon Transportation Commission at noon? Seeing none, Paul, I haven't coordinated. Excuse me, I haven't coordinated with you, but I would assume we should mute and turn off our cameras and just get back here at noon. Is that correct?
Yes, you may want to be back just a couple of minutes before noon, but noon is when we are to start that conversation.
Okay, we'll see you all a couple of minutes before noon. Thank you.
welcome. My name is Brenda Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of the Lane Council of Governments and the Central Lane MPO, and I welcome you all to this meeting today. I wish we could all be together, but this is pretty good to get together like this. And so how we're going to work this today, given that there's such a large number of people in this meeting, is I will allow to introduce himself, as well as anyone from ODOT that is joining us today. And then Mayor Gowing, I'll have you open the Lane Act meeting. The MPC meeting is already open, as we just took a break. And then instead of having everyone introduce themselves, which would be very chaotic and take quite a long time, once we begin the discussion, if you will use your hand-raising device on the program to raise your hand, or either put in the chat that you would like to enter the discussion, I will call on you. And at that time, please introduce yourself and which body you sit on and which jurisdiction you are representing. And hopefully that'll work out. And if not, we'll pivot and we'll try something else. So
Thanks,
with
Brenda.
that,
I'm going to pivot right now. I just want to provide a minute really to thank OTC Chair Van Brocklin. We were talking before, we talked about this, and he's doing it, he's following through. And just for everyone, just a minute on how this meeting occurred, and we're delighted it could occur. Some of the MPC members were a little unclear when some of our staff were presenting OTC directions and planning. And really, Mayor Van Gordon from Springfield called me, and we talked, and we agreed, were it not for COVID and wildfires, we would just be going up and having a cup of coffee with the chair and trying to get clarification and communication. Sean took the initiative. He reached out via email. We set a meeting. We invited Commissioner Buck to join us. She's positioned on so many transportation groups. And at that time, we invited Chair Van Brocklin, and he kindly agreed, and here we are. So I wanted to provide that context. This is an exciting meeting for all of us. This, I think, will initiate open communications. And Brenda, I'm sorry for the pivot, but I really needed to do that. And I know that Chair Van Brocklin has some initial comments, and I know that Chair Gowing needs to convene the Lane Act board.
correct. Yes, thank you, Chair Bertie. So why don't we have Mayor Gowing convene the Lane Act, and then I'll turn it over to Chair Van Brocklin.
Okay, then I will call the meeting of the Lane Act in order. I'm not sure if we have a quorum yet, but I think we have enough members here that. So at that time, you can turn it over to Chair Van Brocklin.
It looks like, Mayor Gowing, it looks like you have 11 ACT members at the current moment. So you still do not have a quorum, but we're good to go with the conversation. So
Yeah,
with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Van Brocklin. Okay.
Well,
Chair Van Brocklin, welcome.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you very much. So I'm really happy to be here today. And as Joe was just describing, there was outreach on your end that helped facilitate that this meeting. And I really appreciate the mayor and the commissioners reaching out to me. We had a good conversation, which has now led to this conversation, and I'm sure there will be many more to follow. So just let me quickly mention that I'm joined today by a number of people from ODOT, including Travis Brower and Cooper Brown, who are assistant directors, two of our four assistant directors, Karen Rowe, Sonny Chickering, Bill Johnston. I may be missing others. So Eric Havig is with us as well, who has been very involved in the Connect Oregon program. So a number of people in addition to me, and we'll try and involve all of them. In addition, Commissioner Brown, Julie Brown, is planning to join us. She has a little bit of a conflict, that a little bit of an overlap, and will probably be here about a quarter after. So we can look for Julie to join us. So I just want to say I'm very happy to be here, and want to thank the ACT and the MPO for convening and putting this together, and look forward to the conversation, which we want to be a two-way conversation, really an exchange of ideas and thoughts, not just be talking. Maybe I should just say at the outset that I have fond memories of living in Eugene. I lived in Eugene a total of 7 years as an undergraduate at the University of Oregon in the Honors College there. And I had a great experience in Eugene as an undergraduate, and earned my undergraduate degree from Oregon. I then went to Washington, D.C., and I worked for a period of time in the U.S. Senate. And I was actually planning to go to law school at Georgetown. And then I was sitting at my desk one day, and I had the Washington Post open, and I noticed an article which said, "Highest law school tuitions in country." That was the title. That was the headline. And it caught my eye. So I read it, and it said that Georgetown and George Washington had the two highest tuition and fees schedules, and the most expensive law schools in the country. And I thought, because my parents had largely put me through undergraduate, but it made it quite clear they would not be putting me through law school. So I was going to do this on my own dime. I thought, maybe not Georgetown, maybe Oregon, which was the most cost-conscious option. And so I left Washington and moved back to Eugene for another 3 years. So there you have the 7 years. So I really have fond memories of living in Eugene and Lane County, and really enjoyed that experience both times. I would say I'd enjoyed it a little bit more as an undergraduate than as a law student, because I was essentially in the library constantly as a law student. One other thing I would say is it's nice to be having this in June. It's unfortunate we're having it on a Zoom call in one respect, which is because I was in Eugene essentially for academic years, I've never spent a summer in Eugene. And I regret that, because it's a beautiful city, and it's a beautiful, Oregon, as you know, it's a beautiful place in the summer, but I was never there in the summer. Since that time, most recently, I worked for a short period of time after I left the Senate for the city of Portland. So I do have background in local and state government as well. And then I went to my law firm, Stoll Reeves, and I've been at Stoll Reeves for 35 years.
Oh, you're at Stoll Reeves?
Yes.
We used to be a client of Stoll Reeves. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
No, not at all. So that's, and I was firm managing partner at Stoll Reeves for almost 10 years. So that's my background. So I want to start again at the top by thanking the MPO and the ACT for convening this. And I'm sorry it's been a period of time. There, of course, there's been a lot going on in the last couple of years. And I would say three things that have kind of influenced the pace of connectivity have been House Bill 2017, which really took, earmarked all of the enhanced money, which kind of changed the dialogue we started to have with the ACTs back when I joined the commission in 2017. It was just starting to change. COVID, of course. And COVID for us is really, as it has for all of you, I'm sure, just created a lot of changes that we're adapting to. And one of the big changes that is caused by COVID is that we are one of the few commissions in the state that actually hit the road, other than when the legislature is in session, and get around the state. And we hold our meetings around the state. And as those of you who've been involved for a while know, as a consequence, one of the great things about having meetings all over the state is we get to meet in person with representatives of the ACTs and MPOs and local government that we just have not done as much by Zoom. And that's probably a mistake on our part, but it's a slow kind of transition away from being able to do that. So these kinds of things we need to be doing more often. In that regard, one of the things I've done is asked Commissioner Brown, who should be here in a moment, to act as the commission's liaison to all 12 acts, as well as I had asked Commissioner Henderson to join her. So it was actually the two of them that were going to do it. And then Commissioner Henderson was offered a position as senior policy advisor to U.S. DOT Secretary Buttigieg. And so he was only on the commission for about 3 months before he was nabbed by the Biden administration and now sits in his position in the secretary's office, which is great for Oregon to have Maurice there, but it also kind of put a little bit of a challenge in terms of what we had in mind and what I had in mind in terms of Julie and Maurice sharing this act in local government outreach. So Julie's going to be here in a few minutes. We are still without a fifth member of the commission. The governor has not yet named a nominee. And so there are only 4 of us right now, and there's a lot of ground to cover. The second thing, so again, I apologize for the fact it's been a little while. We're going to, no pun intended, we're going to get our act together on this and do a better job. And that's on us. So I want you to hear that it's not because we don't think it's important. It's because of all of the things that have gone on. And I haven't even mentioned wildfires, which is something we didn't think we'd be involved in and became involved in a major way. And I'm sure you have read about that. The second thing I want to mention just very quickly is I joined the commission in the fall of 2017. Since that time, there's been a lot of change at the department and at the commission. So I believe Orlando Simpson is the only member of the commission who was on the commission when I joined it in 2017. Man, we've had at least 2 or 3 people come and go. Commissioner Paula Brown from Ashland left soon after I joined. I don't think it was a cause and effect thing, but you'd have to ask her. The second was, I'm sure I'm going to forget someone, but Commissioner Sean O'Halloran, who is at Nike, used to represent Senator Hatfield. I knew him in DC when we worked collaboratively. He left the commission to join the Port of Portland Commission at the urging of the governor, and was replaced by Julie Brown, who you'll meet in a second. And then we've had more recently Martin Callery leave, and now Maurice Henderson leave. And so we've had a lot of change at the commission. And we are still, as I say, awaiting the appointment of a 5th commissioner. Well, the director's position changed in 2019. I led that national search. It was a very comprehensive search. It went on about 10 months from start to finish. And we now have Director Chris Strickler in place, succeeding Director Matt Garrett, who was the longest serving state DOT director at the time of his resignation. He had been director for, I believe, 15 years. So, that's a long tenure in state DOT directorships. So Chris joined us in November of 19. Chris also, when he joined, began a process of, instituted a reorganization of the senior management at ODOT, which led to 4 assistant directors, 2 of whom are on this call, Travis Brower and Cooper Brown, and 2 others, Nicotris Perkins and Lindsay Baker. As a layer underneath the director, that the administrators and others then report up to free up the director to do some of the other things that he needs to be doing. We also adopted a strategic action plan last year and are implementing it beginning this year. And the governor, of course, among other things, issued an executive order on climate, which has specific direction to us on electrification and on GHG reduction vis-a-vis the STIP program. The other change, of course, which I alluded to a minute ago, and then I'll wrap up here, is House Bill 2017 also changed the way enhanced projects are selected by earmarking them. So Rose Quarter, I'll just name a few that are the most expensive ones. Rose Quarter and Abernathy Bridge, those are mega projects and projects throughout the state that were named in the bill, as opposed to the traditional process, which would be us getting with the ACTs and getting their input. We still had input, but the money was spoken for. So that was a big change as well. So as long as I'm talking about the subject of change, that as part of House Bill 2017 was a pretty significant change. We also, in this STIP that we just approved allocations on, subject to refinement, those changes are that STIP is the 24-27 STIP, and there we made a decision as a commission to allocate a significant amount of funding to non-highway. In fact, someone was telling me the other day, I have to follow through on this and see if it's, verify it, but that among state DOTs, we made on a percentage basis one of, if not the largest, commitments to non-highway. So that's transit, pedestrian, bike, and other kinds of changes that are different from the 21-24 STIP. So comparing those two, we moved a significant amount of funding, comparatively speaking, from other buckets into the non-highway bucket. So I'll just finish by two things. One, again, I want to emphasize really a purpose of this to have a conversation. And I hope we can have a good conversation about kind of where things sit on transportation and what you all think about and what you hope we are thinking about, and making sure we're collaborating. And the last thing I will say is Commissioner Julie Brown has now joined us. So again, Commissioner Brown is going to, I hope, with the second commissioner, we had that lined up with Commissioner Henderson. Now we have to reline it up, hopefully with our new commissioner, whenever he or she arrives, that Julie and a second commissioner would act as co-liaisons. But really, I think of Julie as the lead because she's the continuing member of the commission to reach out to the 12 acts around the state and to try and do that with all 12 acts at least once a year. So that's our hope. That doesn't preclude me talking to you from time to time or being available to you, but we want to make sure that at minimum we've got connection by the commission itself with all the acts. And so I guess I'll stop and maybe turn it over to Julie for a second to see if she's got any opening comments, and then have a conversation in whatever way you'd like to conduct it.
So good afternoon. Sorry I was late. I was actually on another Zoom meeting, but I wanted to thank you for inviting us. And I really am excited about this. This is one of the areas where, when the conversation came around to what is the role of the acts, how do we move forward in the ODOT world in the future, and what will the roles look like, and what does the commission want, and of course, what do the acts want? And in each area, I've been kind of popping into different meetings, and in each area, it's unique to the area. And I think that that's one of the important things about the acts is that you bring your local needs and your local flavor to any meeting. With that said, we've been tasked with a large or a big job. I'm the general manager of a transit agency on top of serving on the commission. And so there's a lot of needs for transportation throughout the state. And so we're constantly being asked to participate. What I will tell you that is when I was asked if I was interested in serving as liaison, I said, absolutely, and jumped in with both feet. With that said, I will try to participate as often as I can. But as Bob alluded, there are 12 acts and we're saying that we will come once a year. Well, that's probably not enough. And so one of the things that would be helpful to me, and I'm sure to my counterpart, whoever that is going to be, is that if there is something very important that you want us to address or really look at or have a conversation about, that the invitation goes out and that you make it really clear, we really want you to come to this meeting. I can't guarantee I could say yes every single time, but I am going to give it my best shot. If I can't do it, I think, like Bob said, he's willing to attend once in a while too. I think that some of your I believe your meetings are in the evening. Is that correct? Which makes it a lot easier for me. I can usually jump in the evenings versus during the day because there are so many meetings stacked on top of each other. So I just wanted to let you know I have dedicated myself to doing this, and I look forward to any conversations we have in the future. And I'll just stop with that and let you guys move ahead and have a conversation here. And again, I apologize for being late.
I should mention that Julie lives in Medford and is the executive director of the Rogue Valley Transit District. So Brenda, Paul, how would you like to proceed if you have thoughts on how you'd like to have a conversation? We're happy to have it in whatever way you want.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we'll open up the floor for questions. Again, raise your hand with the program little hand raise, and if you don't know how to do that, you can just send a chat. We're monitoring the chat. I will call on you one by one. At that point, please introduce yourself and which body you are representing in jurisdiction, and ask the question, and hopefully those questions will lead to a robust conversation. Does anyone have a question? Okay, let's see here. Yes, okay, our Mayor Van Gordon.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield. I sit on both the Lane Act and the MPC. My question, first of all, thank you so much for coming. A lot of times when I hear ODOT talk, it's about their relationship and their with the acts. What do you both view your relationships between the OTC and the MPOs across the state as?
So maybe I can make a few comments. We recognize the importance of the MPOs, and I know this is our opening comments were heavily ACT focused, but clearly the MPOs are critical partners. In some spheres, we're required to consult with or otherwise engage with the MPOs, as you know, and then in other ways, they're just a very important entity, whether it's a council of governments or in Portland Metro, et cetera, that we need to be closely connected to. That it varies from MPO to MPO. There tends to be a lot of connection with the agency itself, but sometimes that percolates up to us. My impression of the MPO relationships with the department is that they're fairly active, but maybe I could turn to Travis to get his view on that, because I know he has a lot of dealings with the MPOs.
Yeah, certainly. We do recognize really key partners in the MPOs, and Eric Habig from our Policy Data and Analysis Division and other members of that division team spend a lot of time and effort working with MPOs as a group. We obviously also have key relationships with MPOs at the region level with our area managers or region managers participating in MPO discussions. We've recognized I guess it's a growing recognition of the importance of MPOs. And in more recent years, when we were in person, have increasingly incorporated members of the MPOs into some of the discussions at the commission workshops, recognizing that, the MPOs are technically independent bodies, not chartered by ODOT or the commission. The acts fulfill that role, but we recognize that all the MPOs play a really important role within the metropolitan regions, which constitute something like 60% of the state's population. And so have increasingly incorporated MPOs into some of those larger discussions when we've had those OTC workshops to put them in the same.
Travis, excuse the interruption. Brenda, your mic's on, so we're having trouble hearing. I'm sorry, Travis.
Oh, sorry. I was actually just wrapping up there and apologize. I'll try to get closer to the mic in the future.
No, you're good. You're good.
So any other thoughts on that? I want to make sure I'm sharing the mic from our side.
Bob, I think one of the things, I'm very involved with our MPO and also with our ACT here in Southern Oregon. And one of the things over the years that I've really watched happen, and I've been a person who's actually spoke up quite often, that one of my frustrations is when they act independently of each other, the priority lists aren't always the same. And what happens is, as you're moving forward with projects and each of you are working siloed, the opportunity to actually work together and concentrate on a project is lost. Now, I'm not saying that is always what happens, but I think that if you actually have a cross pollination, and we do here in the Rogue Valley, so a lot of the members of the MPO also serve on the ACT, we're able to kind of prioritize a project and really come down and look at a project and try to leverage funding for that project. And I think our role as the OTC, the piece of ODOT, is that a lot of times we can also leverage the funds for that project. So all of a sudden you have a region that's moving something ahead as a priority and is getting it done versus little pieces being broken up and done by different entities. And so I just think it gives you a better opportunity. It's a better way to communicate and to really prioritize what's needed for your region. And those are just my thoughts, but it's something that has been really something that I've said over the years, many, many times. I think Travis and Eric have both heard me say this repeatedly. So I don't know if there's anything we could do to change that role a little bit, to make it a little bit different, but I think that it just helps for us as a state and a region to communicate better and to get things done.
Maybe I'd just say one last thing about this, and this goes back to my days in government. I think part of what this conversation with respect to the MPOs belies is the role of the federal government. And I was active in the government when there was more discretionary resource available from the federal level, and we were well positioned for it because we had Senator Hatfield and Senator Packwood and Representative Coyne and others. I'm not saying that our delegation isn't well positioned. I'm saying that the commitment to federal investment is not what it was then. And that's a very galvanizing thing when you have the potential to deliver very large amounts of money from the federal government. That I was involved here with the first light rail line, which was the Banfield line. It broadened the Banfield Freeway from 4 to 6 lanes. It put in a 15-mile light rail line from downtown Portland to Gresham. And just to give you all that, I'm feeling like I'm about 300 years old saying this, but the local match on the highway portion of that project was 10%, 90% federally funded on the highway expansion. And the light rail line was a mix of federal monies. So they all had different percentages, but if you average out the percentages, it was somewhere between 83 and 85% federally funded. That's the kind of commitment I'm talking about. If you have that level of commitment, people in various regions of the state coalesce very quickly because the amounts are large, the match is small, and the positive impact is huge. So without a federal government partner that is willing to go there, it puts an enormous amount of pressure on state and local government. And I say this in every meeting. The federal government's got to play. Whether you like the gas tax or not, and I think there are other sources of revenue that are more interesting to talk about than gas tax, but setting that aside, that discussion aside, the federal government hasn't raised the Congress hasn't raised the federal gas tax since 1993. And that just, we just had a state legislature on a bipartisan basis in 2017 raise the gas tax 6 cents. And, that was a model of courageous bipartisan governmental action that is unfortunately pretty rare. But we don't have the functionality at the federal level that we need, and I think the president's currently experiencing that. And hopefully I'll be wrong on that, and they'll have something favorable to report on an infrastructure bill. So love to see that. But I do think the absence of that is to me, that's an elephant in the room.
Okay, thank you. We have some hands raised. So I'm going to start with Claire Surratt, followed by Rob Zako, Tivinis, and then Randy Groves. So Councilor Surratt, please introduce yourself and continue the discussion.
Thank you, Brenda. So Eugene City Councilor Claire Surratt, member of the Lane Act, former chair, and also former member of the MPO. And thank you so much, Chair Commissioner Van Brockland and Brown, for joining us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. I just wanted, kind of in response to Commissioner Brown's exhortations that the MPO and the Lane Act seek coordination, I want to share that I feel like we have pretty excellent coordination and synergy between our two bodies. There's a lot of crossover in membership, and even regardless of that, we've coalesced around pretty important projects. And then adding on to that, one of those important projects in terms of positioning ourselves to go for those federal dollars that Commissioner Van Brockland was referring to. We've identified a transformation of the Franklin Corridor, which you might remember, Commissioner Van Brockland goes right past the University of Oregon. And we lobbied our federal partners as part of our United Front effort, which includes Lane County, City of Springfield, City of Eugene, Lane Transit District, and had some excellent meetings with folks at USDOT and also in our federal delegation offices around getting that project funded. And we feel like we're in a good space for that. So I think we're doing that work that you are encouraging us to do, and I think we're doing it very successfully. So I think still are, particularly speaking from the perspective of the ACT, and this won't be news to you, our frustration really is our communication and responsiveness from OTC and ODOT to those priority areas that we've been coalescing around. And so our Beltline exchange would be an example of that. That is something that the city of Coburg has identified as very important to their own quality of life and their smaller community, where people are avoiding that interchange because it's so terrible and coming through the middle of Coburg instead. It's important for people who need to cross the city, and it just has a lot of significance. And so we're really hoping that, moving forward, we can find a way, and I'm encouraged by your actually asking specific commissioners to do outreach to the ACT, that we can find a way forward where we're feeling more heard in the terms of these relationships that we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, and we want that too. So to the extent that's not happening, we need for it to happen. We want to understand that the MPOs and the ACTs and the county and city governments are our primary ways to learn about various parts of the state. So we have to have high quality dialogue. And if we're not having it at the ODOT level and at the commission level directly, but also indirectly through the agency, then we need to improve that. And we're committed to doing that. And I hope you see this as kind of a beginning. I think Julie, being a local leader of a local government right now, is a valuable asset because she deals with this in her own work every day in ways, frankly, that I don't. Practicing law at Stoll Reeves, I'm not in the midst of it daily, but she is. So that's why I thought she was a good person to put onto this. Plus, she's relentless and she's very candid, which I think candor is a good thing in this. We need to be able to talk straight. I think Rob was going to ask a question. Is that correct?
If I'm yes. So next we do have Rob Zako followed by Lucy Vennis.
Perfect.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Chair Van Brocklin. Thank you, Commissioner Brown, for being with us today. I remember having lunch with you both in Lebanon 2-3 years ago at the OTC meeting. And I believe that some of these ACT discussions evolved out of conversations we had back then. So it's good to close the loop. Chair Van Brocklin, in your opening comments, you talked about wanting to collaborate. Collaborate was the word you used with the ACT and the MPO. And I appreciate the sentiment. And I take that to you using the word in the plain English meaning of that. But I know as a lawyer, you understand that's important to be precise with language. And there's actually a more technical definition of what it means to collaborate. For people here, I've posted to the chat box the International Association of Public Participation Spectrum of Public Participation. And as you may know, it's a range from less impact to greater impact on decisions. And at one extreme is inform, at the other extreme is empower, and in between is consult, involve, and collaborate. So for collaborate, the goal is, quote, to partner with the public, or in this case, the ACT and the MPO, in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and the identification of the preferred solution. And the promise is we will look to you for advice and innovation, formulating solutions, incorporate your advice and recommendations in the decisions to the maximum extent possible. My question is actually, and this is something that Lane Act has discussed, and we really like the OTC to discuss this as a matter of policy. Where would the OTC like to see your engagement with ACTs and MPOs on the spectrum. Certainly in power is too far to one extreme. You're not going to just give us money and spend it any way we want. But I would think that many of our colleagues here probably feel like we're much closer to form, where ODOT and the OTC make decisions and they tell us what you're going to do, and that's pretty much it. And so we're wondering if you might nudge us over to consult or involve, or as you offered, collaborate. Again, this is something we'd like the OTC to discuss, and we'd welcome an answer from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. We will discuss that point, and I think it's really kind of at the core of these discussions that we're trying to get going, and that I think Julie and Jerry Bohart has been working on this to some degree, although she retired at the end of last year, but she stayed on to work on parts of this, and Eric has been very involved in it, and others that were in light of House Bill 2017. We're trying to figure out, what the new or what the modified or modern role of the act will be, the current and future role. So it's a good question, and it's a timely question.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Next, Lucy Venus, followed by Randy Groves.
Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you, Chair Van Brocklin and Commissioner Brown. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. We've had we've been very eager to build a better, stronger communication and understanding. And so I've served on the MPC since I took office initially in 2017. And, and it took me a full year to understand any of the acronyms. So, it's a complicated business. So I step into this always with a little trepidation and care. And actually, you're hearing from a lot of Eugene leadership today. Councilor Surratt said many of the things that I might have said, but I did want to just kind of ask about you made a comment about the lack of federal commitment to infrastructure and the percentages, and yet we are here with a new administration with a enormous commitment on infrastructure and a big push on infrastructure, and we do want to position ourselves to make the most of this opportunity, both to upgrade and to rethink and reimagine what our infrastructure needs to be. And so I just wanted to put that out there to you, what your thoughts about that are, because I'm fully expecting something really good things to happen. And I was involved in a pretty compelling meeting just earlier today on infrastructure, and another one last week. And so, just a little bit of, I don't want to sort of dismiss the role of the MPOs and federal funding at a moment like this, when it feels to me that it is ripe with opportunity for us.
Yeah, so I think this is I think we're in a time where, as a consequence of the president and some leadership in the Congress, that we are closer than we've been in a long time to a significant additional commitment. So I didn't mean to come off as being pessimistic. I'm just saying it's been a long time since 1993. I mean, I had hair in 1993, okay? My third daughter, who's now 28, was, or will be 28 next month, was born in 1993. So it's been a long time since we've had, I'm not saying we had nothing from the federal government. First of all, we have had funding, but I'm just talking about at the level that I saw, in the 80s. And we're in discretionary funding, and part of it, we were in the catbird seat because we had very powerful members that were well situated on the appropriations committees. So I guess what I would say about where we are today is I think there's a clear support. I mean, the president started with a $2+ trillion measure that he carved back, and has carved back a little bit further in an effort to try and get the votes. And the real question, frankly, on a political level, is where's the Senate? And can you it's pretty clear you're not going to do it with a 60 vote requirement. So you have to do it through reconciliation, and you have to get to 50 votes plus one. And the plus one works in the White House now. So it's, where's Joe Manchin? I mean, it really is a conversation about specific members of the Senate and whether you can get to the number. If you can get to the number, you're absolutely right. It's a huge opportunity. And the agency and we in support of the agency and they in support of us have been positioning ourselves for the moment that happens, if it happens. But my only point was it needs to happen. If you look at where infrastructure is in the United States today, with balanced budget requirements in most state constitutions, with bonding limits, just practical bonding limits on what the state can, there are limits without kind of threatening the rating of your bonds, that cannot do it. It cannot be done by the states. It's a federal responsibility. And particularly when you look at the interstate system, it's federally mandated. So if you're going to make improvements to it, when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about the way the president's talking about it. The water systems need work. The sewer systems need work. Bridges, highways, mass transit systems, trying to get off of so much dependency on carbon. We have to drive carbon down. This is the deal. And we have to have the federal government in big. So I applaud the president. I applaud the supporters of trying to do something big. I just don't know what they'll get to, and they very well may get a package. But that recent history, and I'm talking about 25 years plus, has been that there has been an unwillingness to invest and to raise the revenue to invest at the levels that are going to be required. And until we have the federal government at the table in a bigger way than they are today, I don't think we solve the nation's infrastructure problems. So I'm hopeful, love to see it happen. We're set up to move if it does happen. We have people, including obviously Congressman DeFazio, in hugely important positions, but I don't know, maybe it's too long practicing law, but until the deal is done and signed, it's not done, and it can crater. And so I'm with you. I am not opposed to what my sentiments are aligned perfectly with yours. It's just until it happens, it hasn't happened. When it happens, it'll be a great moment, I think, and the country needs it.
I think to expand a little bit on that, Bob, one of the things to Lisa's question is that a lot of times I feel like in the state of Oregon, the cities and counties are kind of behind the 8 ball when it gets to the point of being prepared when some kind of infrastructure system comes down to where there's an offering. And I'll give you an example is Connect Oregon is one that we've done in state, but a lot of times it was like shovel ready. Are you shovel ready? Can you go at a drop of a dime? Can you get a project out there? A lot of times and transit has had to deal with this over the years. It's hard to imagine what the future should look like when you've lived in the poorhouse for so long and you've had to scrape every single piece of or every dollar to move a project forward. So when things like this happen over the years, a lot of people weren't prepared. So before, back when Trump was in the White House, I started talking to our MPO going, look, if the administration turns over, we need to be prepared. There will be an infrastructure bill. We need to move forward. Congressman DeFazio has been talking about this for a long time. I went to Washington, D.C. I talked with the staff. And one of the things that, became apparent was when earmarking came open and people started talking about earmarking, there were a lot of people that were prepared in different cities and different counties, different transit agencies. And guess what? We all threw our projects out there. I mean, it was like we threw up all over the table. And I feel sorry in some ways. I'm sorry, I'm a little graphic sometimes, but you know, I feel sorry for our congressional delegation because they were hit between the eyes with projects and they had no idea how to prioritize it in their own world. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's sending in these requests. And for me, you know, Congressman Benz sent me back a note and said, we're not moving forward with any of it. And our staff had spent a long time working on this. But now we moved to the senators and we started moving things forward and sending things into them just recently. I think the piece that was missing, ODOT over the years have been asking the question, what is your priorities in your community? Give us what are the top projects you wanted funded and what's 100% behind that? Give us a list. And so when ODOT moved forward with earmarking and trying to identify, they used those lists. Were they up to date? Maybe. If a MPO or an act gave them an updated list, of course they updated their list. But I don't feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, Travis, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure that everything that got sent forward and as earmarks were actually a priority on ODOT's list. So that's where I think we can do a better job. And I think that and I've talked to Bob over a period of time and saying, we need to be hounding our congressional delegation in the state of Oregon with ODOT and the state of Oregon's transportation needs. We need to be at the table. We shouldn't be an afterthought, like we come in on the backside. We should be there right now, continuously. It's not a one-time, one-deal thing. It is an ongoing, it's kind of like transit. For years and years, we told the OTC, we are dirt poor. We need money. We can't move a transit system. We can't make a change in climate. We can't make a change in congestion. We can't do any of these things because you don't fund us. And after a while, it got to the point where the commission didn't even want to see my name pop up on the agenda because they knew that I was going to say the same thing. And I never only spoke for RVTD, but I spoke for the state of Oregon. And I think that that's the piece that you guys need to remember. All of you are important to us. All of you have needs, but we also have to cover the entire state. And how do we do this in a way that makes sense? And I think that's where our strategic action plan kind of speaks to where we're trying to put our priorities. And then we're going to have to work in the rest of this system to get all of this it's a lot of moving parts. So all I can say is, you know, bear with us and give, you know, but we are there with you. We get it.
We're bearing with Brenda. It's 12:53. We have a number of people that would still like to speak. So we would love that opportunity if we could.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I might just have Travis maybe spend 2 minutes just kind of summarizing where the current discussions are on the current bill, because he and I at least had a lot of interaction on this. So, Travis?
Yeah, at the federal level, and I put some of this in the chat, just last week, the EPW committee in the Senate passed a bill with a 31% increase in federal funding. So very significant increase. The reality is, though, that comes after we had 12 years of literally flat funding from the feds, so a significant decline. Chairman DeFazio is going to start working on his bill this month in terms of public markup of that legislation, and we certainly see potential progress on the infrastructure bill front. I'm actually getting very optimistic. I think that if an infrastructure bill writ large moves forward, transportation will be extremely well funded. Even if one doesn't, a standalone surface transportation reauthorization may be the consolation prize that both parties can bring home as a bipartisan success story.
And we have been providing project lists in coordination with the MPOs and others, state, local governments, all along the way. Earlier on the infrastructure bill, at least, they were asking for lists per congressional district. And that was something we were coordinating closely with the local governments on. And so, yeah, I agree with you that the consolation prize may be somewhat more likely. So anyway, I think there's a lot of communication going on. If at any point in time you're feeling like what your focus is or your list is not being recognized or not being understood at ODOT, you should call Travis Brower. That's your entry point, because he is kind of got overall responsibility for it. Or obviously you can call me, or you can call Director Strickler, but the fastest thing to do is call Travis. And you may want to call us all, and that's fine. We encourage more information as opposed to less. So other questions?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We actually have just a couple minutes left, and we have Randy Groves, Joe Burney, and Heather Buck in the queue.
Okay.
For those of you that aren't watching the chat, Travis just posted his cell phone number in there, so give him a call. Just ask how he's doing periodically. And then I would ask, maybe since we're running out of time, whether or not it would be all right with you, Chair Van Brocklin, if people had additional questions where we didn't have time to address, if we could compile those and send those to you separately after the meeting.
That would be fine. And I'm also happy to meet with you again.
That would be excellent. Thank you so much, Chair Van Brocklin.
I think that's better.
All right.
That's better. This is better than getting written response. That's not building relationship. You don't get to see me. I don't get to see you. I don't get to at least kind of get to know who you are a little bit, a tiny bit. So I'm happy to stay a few minutes after if that would help anyone.
All right. Well, we'll move along and we'll see how that goes. Thank you, Chair Van Brocklin. Randy Groves, you're up.
Thank you, Brenda. I'll try and shorten this. Thank you, Chair Van Brocklin and Commissioner Brown, for being with us today. I do hope we get more opportunities in the future. I'm Eugene City Councilor. I just took office in January, so I'm still learning some of the ropes. I'm on the MPO. I'm also on the ODOT 126 Widening Steering Committee. And I before becoming a counselor, I completed a 37-year fire service career and worked extensively with your people on the street. I guess my point is Mayor Venice covered a lot of it. Rob Zako covered another portion of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how we can better collaborate, especially on safety issues. I've spent a lot of time responding and seeing the end effect of what happens when things go wrong. And I think sometimes the local, we may not be engineers and know how to design something, but we certainly know where the problems are, where the near misses that occur daily are. And, the more we can do to get towards Vision Zero and having safe roadways, not just for people and vehicles, but all forms of transportation. We have a Beltline bisects and divides a community, and we have a problem with safe routes to schools. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I know they're on the work lists, but just how do we work more effectively together? And I mean, if you don't have time to answer that now, it's something in writing or even a future meeting. I think that would be very helpful to me and my colleagues as we try to be more effective in these very important roles for our community. Thank you.
I would like to talk to you about that. And I would say safety, in my view, I think I speak for the entire commission, is right at the top of the list. I mean, saving people from harm. We just had this discussion at the last commission meeting about some of the arterials around the state, including 82nd and TV Highway out in Washington County, where we're seeing pedestrian deaths at an alarming, well, even one pedestrian death is alarming. So we're seeing more of that. That's not going the right direction, and we're seeing that it's a list of arterials around the state. So it's a big deal. I don't want to short shrift it. I think it requires a longer conversation. We have just made some changes. Cooper can maybe spend 30 seconds just summarizing what we're doing on safety. Well, not what we're doing on safety, but just maybe to tee up how we might continue the conversation. Cooper, do you want to just
Sure.
give a minute's worth of feedback? But I would like to have a longer conversation about it.
You bet. Sure thing, Chair.
So for everyone's awareness, Cooper Brown, I'm the Assistant Director for Operations for ODOT. And just real briefly, we are in the process of restructuring our safety team, really with an eye towards the theme of your question. How can we be more efficient? How can we leverage our resources to the greatest effect to reach that Vision Zero, which is still, the 2035 goal? How do we address pedestrian safety fatalities in particular, recognizing there's an equity angle there? And so we've instituted a short-term program that will allow us to be more responsive to identifying those trends and making investments quickly. But structurally, we have moved our highway safety, historically known as the Highway Safety Office. It now falls under our Department of Motor Vehicles. And so we're in the midst of trying to figure out exactly how those pieces work. And as we concurrently work on retooling how we engage and how the commission engages with the acts, that'll be part of the conversation. I think there'll be some opportunities there to address your question more explicitly.
Thank you.
All right. Bernie, next, followed by Commissioner Heather Buck. And then we'll see whether or not we can wrap this meeting up.
Thank you. Hey, Cooper, my wife would argue with you that DMV's renewing my license didn't do a damn thing for traffic safety. This is going to beg a longer conversation, but I would like to say everyone has been thanking, as I do, Chair Van Broek and Commissioner Brown, but I want to thank all the members of Lane Act and all the members of the local MPO, because we are giving you our time because of how passionately we feel about a lot of these issues. So I thank all the members here. Just as Councillor Groves, actually Vice Chair of the local MPC Groves, has a background in safety, I have a bit of a background in renewable energy, which is why I've worked with Stoll Reeves, by the way, before.
We have a huge renewable energy practice. We're on in 5 continents right now on renewable energy.
I'm intimately familiar with it.
Yeah.
And my question is this, and it may beg discussion later. Obviously, there have been massive, probably one would argue since about 1980, deferment of public investment in a variety of public interests, from housing to mental health to transportation. So we understand the analysis. I'm curious, this body had a report recently from our local transit district on how they are going to be achieving net zero emissions by 2045, I believe it was. My question is, what is OTC specifically doing, and how are locals providing our rich expertise to support locals and the entire Oregon transit system becoming net zero by a specific point in time?
So I would say that you're right. That's a longer discussion. Well, first, I want to thank everyone who's here and every member of the ACT or the MPO or city and county government who are here, and I appreciate very much your involvement. As a volunteer on this, in this role, I would just particularly, I would thank all of you. I particularly thank those that are volunteers, giving their time back to Oregon. That's what I'm doing. That's what Commissioner Brown's doing in this role, and our fellow commissioners, because we care about Oregon. And so that's the very first thing to be said. I want to thank all of those that are serving public life as elected officials, as appointed officials in the governments. And I view the government as a hugely important thing that has been dragged through the dirt a little bit now and again. And I admire people that serve in public office and in public roles, and they're very important to our country and to our state and to our communities. On climate, we opened a climate office a couple of years ago. Well, last year, sorry, but we're making a set of specific priority investments in that on transit, I would let Julie speak to that as the commissioner and also the executive director of a transit agency. But we do have now an employee payroll tax that is funding substantial investment in transit that we're managing for the first time. But in terms, and that of course we view as a very positive step in trying to get at GHG, which is a priority in our strategic action plan. To unpack all of that would take more time, but I'm happy to do it and probably bring our climate folks along.
If I may, Chair.
Yeah.
I offered to connect your climate folks with 2 institutional funds, one of which I actually worked with Stoll Reeves on some projects.
Okay.
There's been no movement towards that, and there are institutional funds that under the right kind of public-private partnership structure could accelerate significantly OTC's ability to electrify transportation.
So I want to follow up on that. And Cooper, are you raising your hand because you know something about this?
I was just going to say, I'll certainly follow up on that. That's good to know. I wasn't tracking that. We'll follow up with the climate team. The other thing I'll just say real quickly, if you will, part of what we put in the resetting our engagements with the acts was really intentional around this question and the question previous, because centerpiece to the strategic action plan are safety issues and our climate considerations and how are we addressing emissions. And so that's really one of the areas that we want to lean into with you all. Is through this strategic action plan is that entry point. How do we address and how do we work together to greater effect on these really key issues that both of the last questions address? So I just wanted to flag that for both. There we go.
Before we go to Commissioner Buck, I'll just say one last thing on this, Commissioner. I think that I'm a big hawk on electrification, not just because it's in the governor's executive order, but because I want Oregon to be. We were just talking about preparedness for federal funding that Councilor Innes was describing. We need to be ready. We're watching it. It's happening. I now own an electric car and a hybrid. And I've told my wife within 2 years, we're going to be a 2 electric car household. The car companies are headed that way. Pace is a conversation. But intent is clear. I remember circulating earlier this year to the commission, the senior leadership of the agency, a New York Times article covering the new CEO at General Motors. She is a strong advocate for getting to driving down carbon and has announced that GM at least going to try and be out on the light passenger side at minimum to be out of the internal combustion engine game by 2035. This is coming. We don't want to have the state have a substantially greater share of its total vehicle fleet. I'm talking about private ownership now or leasing, be electric or plug-in hybrid, and not have the stations, the charging stations, to accommodate that change. So we have to be on this, and we are. We apparently aren't with respect to your specific conversation, but we are generally, and I think we are making some good progress there. Travis called me just a few weeks ago and said that they found an additional $4 million that he was saying, we're planning to put this into electrification charging stations around the state. What do you think? And I said, go. So we're pursuing that, and there'll be more on that front. We'd love to talk to you more about that because there's a whole environmental element to this that is big in our strategic action plan, and we're doing things. We need you guys to know what we're doing. Commissioner Buck, last question for today, and then maybe we'll set up another one August, September, something like that, or earlier if needed.
That would be wonderful. From today's meeting, it's good to meet you and the staff. I haven't had a chance to meet Ms. Brown yet. I'm on a number of transportation infrastructure committees that I can seem to fall into. And getting to know what's going on a national level. As you can see from the questions that are being asked here, we have a large crew that knows quite a bit about transportation and infrastructure. The majority of what we talked about earlier, I would dare to say we know, and we have more expertise to offer, but we just didn't know the right avenue to go to. As we expressed it, without response, we didn't know if it goes anywhere. And so the important part for us, I believe, and people can correct me, but if we want to be able to share that expertise and serve the community and serve the state well in this area, we need to know those avenues. So I think we also need to know your staff better too. You're only 4 people on a board. I know what it's like to be on a small board. You only have so much bandwidth, but it's your staff that really goes through the motions to manage business every single day. And that's where, if we have something really specific, or even, hey, we have this concept, how can we move through that conversation with the right staff and be able to get that great feedback? And if it's just not going to happen, we want to know that too. You know, we just aren't going in that direction. It's not on our agenda. It's not on our strategic plan. Good luck with that. You know, we would like to know that too. But we really want to participate. We really want to serve. I think this is a great start, but it does beg the question of another meeting. Now that we've got to know you a little bit more, generally where things lie, we can delve into some more serious conversations about operations and how that works with the ACT and the MPO. I think there's a lot of opportunity here if we take advantage of it.
Well, I really appreciate those comments. I really appreciate that offer, and I really want to pursue it. So, and we will. So I think, this has been a very useful conversation for us in terms of identifying what we might do next. Another session like this might be one thing, but I also like the idea of maybe a session with a handful of our kind of senior people. I would certainly want Travis and Cooper in that, and then maybe several others with maybe some elected officials combined with some senior leadership in the agency structure there. And, Eugene Springfield is the second largest metro area in the state. So, we need to take advantage of expertise wherever it exists. And we, I think, do to some degree at Metro in Portland, but we should certainly be doing it elsewhere in the state where we can, and we probably are, and I'm just not informed about where we are doing it. So I don't want to, I think we have a very talented staff, and we have now a plan that is trying to focus their attention on what the commission thinks, because we're really a strategic governance oversight board. We're trying to set direction and policy, but our expertise, as you just said, on a number of things you've raised, lies with our agency, which is, there are 5 of us on a good day, 4 of us right now. We have 1 spot to fill, and the governor's been busy at the legislature, and that will get filled soon. But there are 5 of us, and there are 4,700 people at ODOT. So including at least dozens and dozens of leaders in various areas of expertise. So that's where we go often, but there may be benefit in maybe convening some kind of periodic conversation involving the MPOs or the larger MPOs, or some other way in which to get at coordination and collaboration. And I didn't know the definitions that Rob was providing earlier, and I'm glad to know them. Maybe he can send me that document. I'm not sure I got all of it, but We want meaningful interaction. And that sounds like what you want. That moves the state in a positive direction. I mean, that's the only reason we're doing this work is for the state. I mean, I'm not running for anything. I'm not planning to, this is all about giving back. And, Oregon's a special place. We want to keep it special. We also want to keep it relevant, the good economy, good environment, our, ideal, our vaunted high quality of life, all of the things that make it special, protect our natural resources, all kinds of things, values in there. But so we look forward to doing that in a collaborative fashion. We don't know everything. I'm not sure I know anything, but I feel like I know something. So, my job is to really try and facilitate, be helpful, and move us forward and make progress. So with that, Bridget, maybe we should wrap up for today and set another meeting. Did we lose her?
Yes.
No.
No, we're here.
Hi,
yes,
Brenda.
we are over time. I think that was an excellent discussion. I'll turn it over to Chair Bernie and Chair Gowing if they have any closing words. Talk about a next meeting. Be happy to set that up.
Yes, I only have about half an hour of profound closing remarks.
The filibuster lives.
Chair Van Brocklin, we take you up on your offer. Let's definitely have staff set up that second meeting. And this meeting, unless there's anyone that has anything else for the good of the order, other than my dog, this meeting of the June meeting of the MPC is now adjourned. Is Chair Gowing here?
Great. Thank you all very
Chair
much.
Gowing had to step out.
Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. We're all in it together. Let's do some good things.
Thanks, Matt.